Classic literature is classic in that you feel like it speaks to everyone and everywhere. But postcolonial criticism asks a different question. Who gets included in that everyone and who gets left out? Emerging as a major critical approach in the 1990s, postcolonial criticism challenges claims of universalism in Western literature. It asks you to look closely at power, empire, and silence, and to notice how colonial histories shape what is written and what is unsaid. Although the term postcolonial criticism became popular in the 1990s, its ideas appeared much earlier. One early influence is Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth, published in 1961. Using France's African Empire as an example, Fanon argues that European colonial powers deliberately devalued the past of their colonies. They portrayed pre-colonial societies as existing in a pre-civilized limbo, as if history only began with European rule. Another key text is Edward Said's Orientalism in 1978. This book is often seen as a fundamental work of post-colonial criticism. Said argues that the West defines the East as the other. On the one hand, the East is imagined as exotic, mysterious, and seductive. On the other hand, it is presented as uniform and homogeneous. People in the East are not shown as individuals. Instead, they appear as anonymous masses. Their actions are explained through instinctive emotions such as lust, terror, or fury, rather than through cautious decision-making. Their emotions are explained by race, not by personal identity. They act in a certain way not because they are a sister, a parent, or a collector of antique pottery, but because they are labeled as Oriental. So, what do post-colonial critics actually do? First, they reject the claims of universalism made by canonical Western literature. They expose the limits of these texts, especially their inability to emphasize across cultural and ethnic boundaries. Second, they closely examine how other cultures are represented in literature. Third, they draw attention to what texts do not say, especially their silence about colonization and imperialism. A famous example is Edward Said's essay Jane Austen and the Empire, which focuses on Mansfield Park. The central irony of the novel is the English estate of Mansfield Park, an image of order and civilization, is supported by another estate located far away. Mansfield Park would not have been possible without the slave trade, the sugar economy, and the colonial planter class. When Sir Thomas is away managing his colonial interests, young people at Mansfield Park flirt freely without firm parental authority. When he returns, preparations for a theatrical performance are immediately stopped. His return restores discipline and order. We can assume that Sir Thomas exercises the same kind of control on a much larger scale over his plantations in Antigua. In this way, Austen suggests that to rule Mansfield Park is also to rule an imperial state. This connection becomes even clearer when we look at Fanny Price. Fanny begins as a frightened and often mistreated poor relation. Over time, she becomes a fully participating member of the Mansfield Park household. But this transformation has a cost. To earn her place, Fanny must first leave home. She functions almost like an indentured servant, or in more extreme terms, a transported commodity with the promise of future security. Austen presents Fanny's journey as a small domestic movement, but this movement mirrors the larger colonial displacements carried out by Sir Thomas himself.